I'm Eryc Taylor. I'm the artistic director of Eryc Taylor Dance here in the city. And yes, we are here live for our first 5x5 series. And that's 5x5 is a new artist series that we're starting. And today's guest is Daniel Tobias. He is one of our longtime collaborators, composers, all-around incredible artist, playwright, author. But first I want to tell you a little bit about ETD. We build community through movement, and ETD was established in 2006. We're a New York City-based dance company. We're a nonprofit organization with a mission to advance the appreciation of dance and movement through creating and presenting original performances, conducting master classes, and presenting and curating movement community outreach workshops. We stand for decency, love, and respect for all. And we try to convey that in our company mission and extensive outreach work. ETD is committed to supporting those who work tirelessly, fighting for equality and justice, and we want you to know we're here for you. I want to welcome our first artist of the series, Daniel Tobias. I'm letting him in the room right now, and I can't wait to talk to him about all the work we've collaborated on, especially Uncharted Territory. Welcome, Daniel Tobias. We're right now. Daniel, we're waiting for Daniel to join. Hopefully we're gonna connect with him soon. There he is.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Daniel. Welcome to our first 5x5 artist series. We tried to do this before and it didn't work, so we switched over to Zoom, and I'm glad we got this together. And so, yes, I wanna talk to you about how we met, our early works, and what we're working on now. So why don't you take it away and tell us about how you got to New York and how we met and some of our early works.
Hi, so I'm Daniel Tobias, and I met Eryc at a Pilates class. Remember?
24-hour fitness.
It was like 2009, I think. It was pretty early on, and he was killing me in that floor Pilates class, and I sort of immediately sensed that Eryc was a fire and ice kind of guy that just lived in these great extreme places, and I loved it. And I don't know exactly what led to that, the thread that connected me taking your classes to me composing our first piece together. Something led to that conversation, and before you know it, I was composing a piano piece called The Missing, and this was completed in 2009, and I think you presented it in 2010. That was our first piece, and that was wildly successful. I think that was a really talked about piece, which sort of launched our collaboration at first. And then in 2010, after working with you on that piece, I wrote a song for cello and piano, which is this lovely, beautiful,
one of my favorites. Yes,
rhapsodic type of
beautiful
song that I wrote, and you did very interesting choreography. That was really cool and totally different, and not what I expected. That also got talked about a lot, which was really, really cool just to have this modern dance community in New York City sort of, oh, this is exciting and different and new and fresh and beautiful at the same time. And a couple years, that actually started, I tend to ramble, so Eryc will cut me off if I ramble, but that started collaborating with you on my own personal dance journey, which began in March of 2011 when I started social dancing. I'd never moved my body whatsoever. I even skipped the high school ball because I didn't want to dance. It was so embarrassing to me. But I knew that there was a connection between dance and music that I wanted to understand and experience for myself. So I started dancing, not modern dance, but it was social dancing, which is, accessible for the person on the street.
But ETD was the inspiration for that, right?
It was very much, because I never ever thought of connecting anything I produced to dance or physical movement. I was disconnected from the chin down. I really was. So I started my dance journey in 2011. And then when we came back to our next collaboration, which I believe was The Lure, I think there was another something in between there, but The Lure was the next thing that that I composed for you. And I knew that the approach to The Lure was completely different to anything else, because now dance was in me. It wasn't just a cerebral exercise, it was actually in me. So I started to compose for movement specifically, not for academia, but for movement. And The Lure never was presented because I, at that time, didn't know how to compose or produce digitally. But you know, all things happen for a reason, right? And so Eryc used to get on me all the time. He said, "Daniel, you got to learn to Logic or whatever the DAW, the digital application was." I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. I prefer live musicians and all this stuff, but The Lure was meant to happen. It was meant for us to go to that recording studio and sort of fail, because that led me.
That was a huge failure. My God, we tried
that?
with no rehearsals, just go right into a recording studio and try to record with a conductor.
With like professional orchestral musicians. It was embarrassing.
Massive failure. Yes.
It was embarrassing, but also
it was embarrassing.
But without that, I never would have launched into the education, the deep, intense education to learn to program music, which ultimately we had no idea the pandemic would come along. But ultimately, you know, in 2019 we did the Earth series, and that I could get huge with the sounds in a way I never could with just chamber music or whatever we could afford, because I could program entire orchestral sounds and then expand beyond that and have digital only instruments, right? And digital instruments as well. And that, the collaboration with Earth was epic. It was epic music at the largest.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And it all happened because, you know, we just fell on our faces with the Lord. So it's no regret in that. It's part of the learning curve. Our drums don't matter.
Well, I want to jump in and tell people, if they don't know about Uncharted Territory, and just let people know about, I want to focus on that part of our collaboration. And Uncharted Territory was born out of the pandemic. And you know, there were so many disruptions, and one being company rehearsals, and our efforts to cope with the ongoing circumstances. ETD came together on Zoom in the virtual world, and we started a new repertory work called Uncharted Territory. And we luckily got a grant from Dance NYC, a COVID relief grant, and we were able to keep moving forward. So I designed and created this intricate movement and expression chart. I know Nicole Baker, our rehearsal director, said, "Eryc, you got to come up with something for us. Come on." And I said, no problem. I took like 6 days and tried to come up with this really cool chart, and with lettered columns, I think it's 8 columns across and 20 rows down, with different directives and movement, motions and inspirations and random words. And we took a month every week on Zoom. I gave them 32 counts and they all developed phrases, all the company members. We presented them every week on Zoom. And then the second phase of that was we started developing character work. And then I said, we got to work with Daniel Tobias. He's got to compose these scores for this, because we've been working with him for 10 years. And I'm so, you know, and we had just, like you said, worked together on Earth. And that was a year-long project, which, you know, landed us on PBS and in All Arts. And we I think that was a super successful piece that addressed, used dance and music to address global warming. But here we are with Uncharted Territory, this dancer in isolation project. And then I came to you. So let's talk a little bit about the first piece that you created for us, Daniel. And your music for Uncharted Territory blends symphonic orchestration with digital instrumentation. For instance, the first piece that you composed, Contagion Variations, The middle sections are strings, French horn, and clarinet, but the first and last sections are almost purely digital instruments. Let's talk about that. Why did you decide to go that route, and why did you? Yeah, what led you to that?
I love musical questions. I'll wonk out with music anytime. So
that's why we're here.
Yeah. So I was looking back at the emails, and I recall that May was the first time you sort of reached out to me about Uncharted Territories and brought me into it. Dancers had already done some pre-work before then. My husband, I've been married for 20 years. My husband was one of the first to get sick from COVID in March, early March, and that was the scariest 3 weeks. It was just touch and go for about 3 weeks. And remember, we didn't know much about COVID back then, and it was scary. So when you approached me in May, you had no idea that I was already emotionally primed to just go even further than Earth with Uncharted Territory. And Earth, at the time, I thought was the hardest I'd ever worked for music. I had no idea I work exponentially harder for Uncharted Territory, and it became even more immense. But I knew that going into, as soon as you presented the scope of the project, there would be these intimate stories of dancers and their isolation during the quarantine as well as the pandemic. I knew that the first piece, I had to get all that anxiety and grief and emotion and everything that I had felt when my husband it felt near death. And I had to just get it all out there. So I remember with the first piece, this was going to be about that initial spread of the disease and then move into grief. And I knew grief I could just do. I knew I could do it. But the spread was so not only inhumane, but almost inhuman. That, remember that image of the virus and how we watched that map, the global map, and it trickled from Wuhan, wherever it originated, out across, and that anxiety. Oh, we have one case here. We have another mysterious case in California. All this stuff, and it's spread out and then into our neighborhoods. So I knew that if I could somehow capture that, it would make the grief all the more human if I could capture that with digital sounds, as digital as possible. And so the landscape in the spread, I call it, of the first piece, which is divided into 4 sections. The first section was as much digital landscape as I could have, so that I can contrast that with grief. In the middle, the third section, and I felt that the contrast between digital and the clarinet and the French horn would make that mournful, grieving French horn clarinet sounds even more human, and move it from here down to the heart and the soul. And of course, the clarinet and the French horn are human instruments. You have to breathe to make those sounds. You have to inhale and exhale.
Yes.
They're human instruments, right? So that's part of the reason throughout the whole piece, was to contrast humanity with inhumanity, this relentless, insidious disease. That's the answer.
Right. And for those of you who are just joining, we're in our first 5x5 artist talk with Daniel Tobias. Thank you guys for joining us. My second question is about this. I noticed in 3 of your pieces, in the first one, Contagion Variation, and then Baya Ni Lola, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. And yes, and then the Nurse's Rhapsody for Nicole's section, the rhythm sort of varies, and almost like you turned off the metronome and had the musicians improvise. They're very human sounding. So let's talk about those choices and why you made those choices.
Super astute of you, Eryc. I'm very impressed. Yes. So of course, there are parts of all 6 movements that all 6 pieces in which I literally turned off the metronome and just improvised. I didn't improvise it. It was thoroughly composed, but I played it without the metronome. And for those three pieces, each had a different reason. I'll try to be brief about it. The first one, Contagion Variations, was literally to bring the humanity out to bring out the humanity by taking away the metronome and having it breathe in and out, just like a human would. And I needed no electronics in it. I wanted no electronics. I played it, closed my eyes, and played what I composed, ebbing and flowing. We call it rubato in music, where the rhythm flows and ebbs and speeds up and slows down according to the emotion of it. So that was for the humanity in the first one. And then for Behind You Lola, which is interesting to bring that up because, yeah, I turned off the metronome there because Behind You Lola is based on a Philippine traditional serenade called the Harana. And when you watch this documentary about the Harana, you notice that these are just musicians playing in the family courtyard at the family house, or small intimate bamboo structures. Pets, or the family pets are everywhere, and there's cooking going on, and generations of all ages are there in the courtyard. There's zero electronics. These are usually very, anyway, it's just very organic feeling. No electronics. So I wanted to get rid of the metronome and just have the guitar play freely to get that organic Philippine feeling for that. And then the third piece, Nurse's Rhapsody, is because what I composed for this rhapsody, this piano rhapsody, was so dense. There's no way I could play it to the beat. I mean, which is in a way appropriate because the Nurse's Rhapsody is about a nurse exploding her emotions from the day of treating patients who are sick or dying, and then her going home to her basement and just letting it all out. So in a way, it needs to be an explosion. So I took a little measurement for that.
Yes, and one of my favorite pieces, Dark City.
Oh yeah. I love it.
Yes, wow, yeah. I mean, that kind of hit my heart and blew me away when I heard it. And I think that piece was originally for Alex. Is that right? No,
It was the second piece. I originally composed.
That was yeah. You composed a piece for Alex, and then that was the second score for Alex.
Yes.
And then for those of you who don't know, all of the dancers created their movement and their characters and filmed all of their movement in silence. That was the assignment, so they didn't choreograph to music. We kind of gave you all our Google Drive, and you kind of deciphered all the characters and kind of started developing the music with collaboration back and forth a little bit. But your music was born after the choreography was made and the filming was made. So just so people know what the process was. But Dark City is the only music you've composed for me in 3/4 time. What made you make that choice? Like, why did you? I don't think you've ever composed anything in 3/4 time, which is new for you.
Yeah. So, as an aside, Uncharted Territory actually marks your and my 10-year anniversary of collaboration.
10 years of working together.
Yeah, this is this is a great celebration of 10 years, Eryc. So, cheers to us.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And throughout those 10 years, not once did I ever do any piece in 3/4 time, which you guys might know as a waltz, but it also could be 6/8 or 9/8 or 12/8. Those are all the same 3/4 time feeling. And not once did I do it. And then for Dark City, let's see, I want to answer the question as specifically as I can. When we initially gave Distancia to her, it didn't sit right with her it prompted a conversation between her and I about the subtext of what was really going on under the gestures she created. And it was all about a character who was depressed, but not just any depression. It was depression in New York City. And I used to tell people who were considering moving to New York City, if you have any issues, New York City will exacerbate them. And so depression in New York City, I have a feeling, is unlike any depression in any other place.
Absolutely.
And this was what Alex's character was going through. So I knew my first priority was to capture New York City's relentlessness. And for anybody who's ever danced, 3/4 time has a relentless feel to it. It's probably because there's always an upbeat at the end of it. So it always feels like you need to keep on going. It's this galloping feeling of that you're never in a stasis. Unlike 4/4 time music, you can sort of end and it feels like you've completed a phrase, but 3/4 almost never feels complete. It always feels like you want to keep on going. So the moment I sort of nailed down 3/4 as the landscape, it felt right as far as New York City. And then I could contrast this character fighting that relentlessness with muted trumpets who are going against the 3/4 in duplets, or let's call it 4/4 against the 3/4, in order to sort of fight against that, as well as this the guitars sliding up and down and everything that represented to me depression. But I think, Eryc, and let me know if you agree, there's something about the climax of Dark City which is unlike any climax I think I've ever composed or heard. It's
Absolutely
powerful, but in a very unique way. And I don't know if I can take credit for it. I found it by accident. I'll take credit for it, but I found it by accident by its sliding trombones and the violins 2 octaves above that. And whatever happened, however I discovered it, it absolutely gave me chills, because it captured Alex, the power, the heroic survivalism that Alex brought to the character, pushing through this depression and fighting through, and to me, surviving. I don't know how she's going to interpret the dance, but to me, this is a heroic story, not a victim story, but a hero story. And that climax, I think, will be very moving, I hope, to the audience, because I know it moves me. I know that Alex just grabbed onto the music and said, this is not what I expected, but it's everything and more than what I wanted, which pleased me more than anything, because pleasing the dancers is just the most important thing to me. So
yeah, and the music and the choreography, all of the film is with Benny Crown, our editor. And to see the rough cuts come to life is exhilarating. To see your music paired with all the film that the company has created, and to see what Benny, as the editor, his eye takes from the Google Drive and matches with your music, I think you're going to be really happy. And I know that you edited the trailer. I mean, it makes sense, because you created the music and you worked so closely with this massive Google Drive of content for you to do this. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about Uncharted Territory, the ETD's new year-long project. And the world premiere of this film is going to be on March 21st. And tickets go on sale on March 1st for the world premiere of this. But we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to talk about Chris Bell's work. His character was this character who was this, kind of alter ego of him, who almost, was very hypersexual guy who kind of risks having connections during the lockdown. And his piece is called Path. And you went to some new places musically for that piece. And as soon as I heard all your pieces, I was like, okay, no, that's mine. Because I heard it before anyone else. And I'm like, no, that's my piece. I'm going to dance to that one. Forget Contagion Variation. I wanted to choreograph to this one. And when I heard Path, I was like, oh, no. This is not the same composer. This is definitely not the same person who composed all these other pieces. and you definitely went to somewhere completely. And then when I played it for Chris, and when we played it for I could tell he was like, I don't know if I like this or not. But you know, because they're hearing something for the first time after creating all of the choreography and the filming it during the lockdown, during the pandemic, and the height of this. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that piece.
It's Chris's fault. If people are going to listen to Path, they're either going to love it or hate it. I think it's going to be very polarizing, and if they hate it, it's Chris's fault. So this is what. No, I'm joking. But when you and I had the first interview with Chris, he was describing his narrative, his emotions, and all the things he was going through. And Chris, I could tell, sort of lives a larger than life experience, or his character. I know Chris does too, because I know him personally, but his character definitely was larger than life. But he was describing danger and sexuality and some superhumanness, and then dreams and a whole bunch of things. And any one of them I could have composed a 6 to 12 minute piece, but with all of them I was like, I'm confused. I did not know how to take it, and then I didn't know how to structure or form it or narrow down. And then I realized it's this very contrast of which you don't know what's going to happen next, because it's not telescoped onto one thing, but rather it is a path that is going through a whole bunch of journey. You don't know what's around the corner. That is the structure. That is what makes this exciting. And so I knew I had to match that. I knew that just, you know, kind of the tricks up my sleeve as an orchestrator wasn't going to cut it with Chris. He needed more. And so I went back to the days when I would go to Twilight. Remember Twilight in New York?
Yes.
And just
Twilo.
music. What was it? It was Twilight, right?
Twilo.
I was not like
I remember.
Man. I mean,
yeah. And
days.
that just those DJs that would, you know, have this epic climax and then stop and then start again.
And for me, as this naive kid, drawn into that world, I was as scared as I was excited. And so I wanted music that sort of captured fear and excitement. And Path is about narratively a guy who's risking sexual intimacy during a time in which you need to be socially distant. And so I wanted, you know, for all the reasons people do have sex with each other, it's feels good, but it's exciting and dangerous and blah blah, all that stuff. So the electronic, grunge guitars, there's instruments there that I don't even know what they're named, but they sounded good and gave it a superhuman. But then I wanted to contrast that with, there's so many gestures of Chris wandering through the woods and everything. So I got my little recorder and went into the bathroom, which is the quietest place in Hell's Kitchen where I can record anything, and hummed this melody that I composed, which was sort of hypnotic, but dangerous and sly, and yet sort of reaches into pathos. So like, it was a perfect thing, but I hummed it, which I've never done before. I've never hummed music and then added reverb and then added cellos behind it. Like, that's just risky stuff that I've never done before. But I was like, they're either going to hate it or love it. So here it is. I had to go to those extremes as a composer because Chris went to those extremes as a dancer.
Yeah, and he had the most footage of all the dancers, the most incredible footage. And by the way, the only footage outdoors. I mean, he went outdoors into, like you said, into the woods. He was crossing bridges and has some of the most incredible footage of during the early pandemic in April, May, June, right around there. And when I was with him in the studio, all the dancers rehearsed by themselves in their respective apartments and places. And then once we got a thank you, Marta Heflin Foundation, for supporting us. My God, we couldn't do it without them. We just got another grant from Marta Heflin Foundation, so we love you, Marta Heflin Foundation. Yeah. But I got to be in the studio a couple of times with the dancers not that long ago, I think a month ago, and Chris was like, what are we doing here, Eryc? Like, what's going on here? Like, I just don't get this. You know, I don't get this. And I said, let's just do your solo and go through it. And we struggle, and Chris and I butt heads sometimes, but then he got it. Like, he just got it. He did the solo to the music, to Path, and it just like works in person. It totally works, and
Can't wait to see it. I'm so excited.
it's so amazing. I can't wait till we get to perform live. We were supposed to perform on March 21st in New York City, but we're gonna perform in July, either in a theater or outdoors when it's warmer. March 21st is just too soon. The weather's crazy in New York. We don't have a lot of time left. We have like a couple minutes left. I want to talk about Distancia. That's Taylor's piece. It was supposed to be Alex's piece, but then it perfectly became Taylor's piece because her character was so this social media influencer trapped in a West Village apartment, and her husband is there, but she's just in her own, the whole thing takes place over one day during the pandemic, and she has her wine and she's just kind of lounging around the house in her own world. And Distancia is probably the least musical of all of the musically complicated of all the 6 movements that you created, but it captures something pure and honest. And what's going on with Distancia? I think Taylor again struggled to match, to rehearse in person with it, and she didn't get a lot of one-on-one time with you because that piece was already created. But you and I were so passionate about how well it went with Taylor's choreography and character. We just didn't know that you composed Taylor's music first, because that was originally supposed to be for Alex, for Uncharted Territory. So tell me a little bit about Distancia before we wrap up, and I give props to all my company members and Mallory and everyone. I want to talk about it a little bit.
Distancia is special because, yes, it is the least ambitious musically, but the most pure. And I think it's because once in a while a composer will find a set of chords or a melody that can, I call it like it's a golden set is what I call it. But once in a while in classical as well as modern, you find this golden set which you can repeat over and over and over and feel completely satisfied without much contrast, without going to different places. It's golden. It feels emotionally perfect, resolved, and yet enough pathos that you want to listen to it again and again and again. And when you find that golden set, your job as a composer is to get out of its way, is to let it stand on its own. So I produced the music with just amplified nylon guitar and let it speak for itself. I accompanied some strings behind it, the cello and the bass behind it, and then some violins lightly above it. But mostly it was just giving that amplified nylon guitar space to be complete and on its own. And then, of course, for the climax, I couldn't help it, but I gave the horns the main thrust of the melody, and then gave that lush violin counterpoint to it, which only kind of made it better. It didn't take it away. So ultimately, all of this, of course, serves the narrative of a person at home. And if it didn't sort of initially match her narrative, it's because I was so invested in this feeling that Pedro Almodovar movies give me, or Roma, this feeling of something. You're at home, you're forced to be at home because of the pandemic, and so you start longing, pining, or missing, or realizing how dear your loved ones are to you, which in a way in which you can only do when you're isolated. So Distancia's music captures that.
Well, I can't wait. Thank you so much for Daniel, for being here. It's been an honor working with you last year on Earth, and I mean, in 2019 on Earth, and back from 2009 to the present. And I'm so proud of this body of work, Uncharted Territory, and I'm so excited for everyone to see the world premiere of the film on March 21st. Again, if anyone out there wants to check out our new website, you can visit etd.nyc. We just revamped the website, and there is a tab for Uncharted Territory at the top of the website. So if you want to check out the electronic press kit or any information about Uncharted Territory, please reach out. I do want to say thank you to the Marta Heflin Foundation again, to Dance NYC, to Pentacle, and to the LMCC, and to all of our patrons, supporters. I want to give a big shout out to Mallory, who's been the glue that has kept ETD together. She's been incredibly supportive and helpful. And I want to say, Madeline, she's leaving us. She's been working tirelessly and so wonderful on the social media for ETD and for ETD outreach. So I just want to give a big shout out to Madeline for doing such a great job for the past, I think, almost 6 months or 8 months on ETD social media. So, but please follow us online to learn more about Uncharted Territory. I can't wait to join you for the next 5x5 artist series. I'm going to be talking to Rachel Neville on February 9th. She is one of the most awesome photographers in the world. She has captured some of the most iconic company images for ETD. I love collaborating with her. She's such a smart, intelligent person. And I'm going to be hopefully talking to Lois Greenfield after that. And then I'm going to be talking to Chanel Resto, who is an incredible photographer, young, talented photographer, and she created some of the most unbelievable images of Uncharted Territory through Zoom, through the computer. Did a photo shoot with all of the dancers. I want to thank all my dancers: Chris Bell, Nicole Baker, Alex and Renmer Ortiz, Taylor Ennin, AJ Guevara. They all have done incredible work on Uncharted Territory. Cindy Sabilski also has helped us tremendously. If you want to check out our Uncharted Territory merch, check out our website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Daniel, for being here. I love you so much. I respect you so much. If you want to give a shout out for your social media, go ahead and do that. And then we will see you guys next time on February 9th.
DanielTobias.com. Just subscribe to me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Big hugs to you. Be safe. And I'll see you soon. Love you. Bye.